What's up, everybody? How are you guys doing? I hope everything's great. Thank you for joining me. This is Compound Forms. Of course, I'm Johan Francis, CSCS from CoachJohanCSCS.com, presenting you with another course. This series, Compound Forms, covers strength and conditioning with a little bit of nutrition towards the end. And as a strength coach of many years, going on 2 decades, I have a lot to offer when it comes to strength and conditioning and workout forms. So this is a course where most of what we talk about is going to be formatted into a class structure, but you can also use it as a workout. And I'm fired up to give it to you. Of course, again, here are just my credentials. Almost 20 years in the business. I've worked with a lot of the organizations having to do with what you would call personal training, but set off on my own as a CSCS. And here are the 4 parts of the class. So, as I prefaced in the video, front squatting is my favorite functional move. It's something that I do to this day. I like it better than deadlifting, better than cleans, better than snatches, all of it, because it enacts more muscles. It strengthens more of those muscles, and it does so with the least amount of risk to the athlete. Lesson 2, we're going to go over plyometrics as we talk about jump squatting, the SSC, and finally we'll end with a little bit of plyometric day meal planning. So this is, as we jump right into it, lesson 1, the first of our 4, having to do with squats. So as I just mentioned, this is my preferred method for strengthening the legs, promoting symmetry and balance when you're working with functional exercise. Inside the gym, it's the front squat. I prefer it over back squatting. Lots of people, when I introduce them to the front squat inside the gym, if they haven't tried it, they're a little bit reticent to do so because it is functionally different, but I think functionally better. Okay, you got to remember to brace. Okay, and you're going to find a lot of these key terms on the website for the handout for the entire course. There's one handout for the course at minimum. So you're going to want to brace, right? Which is a move where you contract your abs, elongate your lower spine, and squeeze your butt cheeks together. You preload muscles before you descend into your squat. So you preload that glutes as you descend. And the work that you do preloading helps to strengthen those agonist muscles. Because the bar's in the front of the body, because it's here, and because your elbows have to be out the whole time, there is a different kinetic chain involved, or a different set of kinetics, right? You put more tension here in your lower lumbar spine and your lower thoracic spine and your upper lumbar postures. Because of that, you want to make sure that your body is tense through this area when it needs to be. Further, you're actually able to load more of your hips, counterload more of your hips as you descend, as you can see right here, because of where the bar is. And to me, because you're counter descending by stretching your glutes and flexing your hips, right? You have to control those knees. You don't want those knees going, all the way over to the left and right. You want to keep them in, so you're working more leg muscles. You're working more of your glute muscles, trying to get parallel to this sweet spot. You have to pre-recognize where that sweet spot is. And so these 3 phases of any squat make it the smartest way to perform functional heavy lifts. And yes, you can, if you want to, get heavy when you're doing your front squat at some point. So you want to start in that plumb position. And now, a plumb line is a term taken from the plumbing industry, right? It's a weighted string. You drop the string straight down into the water. But really what it means, as I am going to actually go back to the other slide, is if I hung a weight right here and let that dangle straight down, it's going to make a perfectly straight line once it stops dangling. That line, if I were to put, hold it up here, right next to my ear, would dangle straight down anatomically to my ankle. All the landmarks from my ear to my ankle should be notched on that line. When they are, you are said to be in an anatomically advantageous position, okay? Here are those landmarks: the ear, the shoulder, the greater trunk of the hip, knee, and the malleolus, which is just the scientific name for your ankle bone. That's where you actually want to start. Displacing some of that. Well, you're displacing only your elbows, is the bar, because the bar is, as my icon shows, in the front of your body. So you have to then displace your body at the lumbar spine area. Bracing. If you brace your body, draw in the abs, you're able to maintain proper rotational balance, counter-rotational balance of that bar. The second part is your descent. So as I mentioned earlier, because the bar is in front, you have to maintain a greater stretch of your glutes. How do you stretch a muscle actively? Well, you can do that for proprioception, right? Or preload that muscle, keep it active as you descend, and hope that you can maintain that tension throughout. However, what you're going to notice, and if you're coaching, is that it's going to be very challenging for you to explain this to trainees so much. And what you'll actively get them to do is definitely a preload, but also actively flexing the front of the muscles. Highly proprioceptive. Okay, so by flexing my hamstrings and my hips, I stretch the quads and the glutes. And that proprioception is going to help me initiate my first descent. Of course, we want to make sure those knees don't go rogue and start counter-rotating or hyper-rotating way out to the left and right, and definitely never shear and collapse in. One of the most contentious, I think, theories or postulates having to do with the squat is, where do you end it? So in competition, okay, you guys have seen those huge men and women who do, relatively huge, I guess, who do powerlifting. So they're lifting as much weight as they can, either with a yoke or they have a lot of weight on their back as it is, right? So many plates. And what they'll do is they'll descend all the way until their thighs touch the calves. And it doesn't matter if you're 6'9" or if you're 5'9". Once you get there, which is this joint angle gets a lot, this joint angle gets smaller, obviously, but the one from your knees decreases. When you touch your hamstrings to your calves, you're creating a huge angle up top. That mechanical disadvantage you have to overcome after resting is, I think, hugely detrimental to the strength you'll need in your hips, and it creates a lot of shearing forces in your lumbar spine and lower thoracic, where you don't even want to do that. In other words, you take all of the tension off of the movers when you start resting on your calves. And I think that's a terrible idea for building lasting long-term strength. However, in competition, right, and you can make this argument that you don't get a greater stretch in your quads than if you were to touch your hips to your ankles. So, there is an argument to go ATG ass to grass in these certain situations, but I'd rather say, hey, in your mind, have a predetermined sweet spot to where you want to stop, and that sweet spot should be at or very slightly below parallel with the floor. So your quads, your femur bone should be parallel with the floor, or like another 5 degrees below it, and that's it. And what you're doing is you're then going to recruit those preloaded quad muscles and isometrically contract those the hamstrings and actively have them proprioceptively counter contract and shoot through the range of motion on the way up, creating the greatest amount of strength. What's better than that? So you will never hear me personally advocate for ass to grass squatting inside the gym, not without great potential risk to your athletes or you. That's never ever a good idea in my opinion, unless you're going for competition, right? At the bottom, very important, we have these muscles. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see that one side of the femur, if you're looking at it from the side, like we did in that other picture. So the quads are stretched. That means the hamstrings are flexed. Here, the tibialis muscle is flexed. So the calf muscles, as it were, the gastrocnemius, the soleus, they're stretched. And in that isometric phase, that's where we actually tighten our body. We hold our breath briefly to enact more tension from those muscles isometrically. We're going to drive through our heels and extend, okay? So the quad muscles, calves, there's a host of other muscles that are stretched and shortened, but these are the major ones, right? The biggest ones that act. And you can go ahead and look on Google for the actual individual muscle groups, but it isn't important right now, right? It becomes more important when we're talking about rehabilitation. Okay, so as we go into the concentric phase of our lift, we know what muscles moves. It's the ones that generally burn the most when we work our front squat, the quads, the glutes, right? Maybe, sometimes your hips get burning, your calves. These are the ones that work. Those are the concentric ones. Those are the guys that are actually doing most of the work, because remember, shifting from eccentric to concentric requires the greatest amount of strength because of the mechanical disadvantage and applied to the greatest joint angle around the primary movers, right? So the glutes are really stretched. For them to overcome the mechanical disadvantage that they've inherited from putting this weight on your body, they have to work and recruit more muscle tension, and so as a result, boom, your ass burns, your quads burn, right? And you get stronger. And if I do say so, I have pretty solid form here. My toes aren't strict at 12 o'clock, but they are in a natural foot position. I want you guys to get good at returning to the brace technique at the top. It's very important that you brace, not fully, not so much that this bar goes way behind the ankle bone, right? Because the green line is the plumb line. This bar will follow this line probably right behind. That's how you know you did it right. And the elbows, of course, stay up and perpendicular with the wall in front of you. Okay. You want this bar to go straight down. And when you come back up, you don't want it to go tilting back. That's a hyperextension. Okay? And you guys know that that's not great for your back. Front squatting is also a function of your upper body. You're squeezing your elbows together, and as such, you're working your chest a little bit. Your elbows provide the shelf, right? Just like they do in a back squat, but your elbows being high and the bar being close to your chest provides a great shelf for your body. Okay? Look, if this one's a little too complicated or daunting for you or your trainees, you're going to start out, as we showed in the video, with barbells or a kettlebell, and you're going to work the goblet squat until you can get those elbows up. I've seen varying results with people. Practice is always going to get you there. And really being hands-on, right? Working with people and showing them what muscles to contract, and then using an empty bar, even a kiddie bar, a lighter bar, right? As long as, until they really have a knack for keeping their elbows up, because it is foreign, but well worth it. And you guys, at the end of each lesson, I will show you where you can reach me, just in case you need to reach me, relatively quickly. But thank you for listening to lesson 1, and until lesson 2, take care.